muita gente com vontade de ir jantar, nós vamos tentar não abusar muito da vossa paciência. Antes de mais, quero agradecer a organização do Fórum, ao Rogério e à Safa, por nos terem convidado. Agradecer-vos a todos vós que estão aqui até tão tarde. Uma palavra rápida para os outros também autores da Mil e Mundos presentes, a Madalena, o João Guerreiros, o Otávio que está lá ao fundo. Obrigado por participarem também. E agora vou mudar para inglês. And thank you, Peter, for being here with us. It has been some nice days since Peter's here in Portugal since Wednesday, and we had quite a lot of fun. Did some interviews, and I had the chance to show him around Portugal a bit. But we are here to talk about his work, The Painted Man, or The Warded Man, The Painted Man in England, The Warded Man in the US, and The Desert Spear. Peter, please tell us a bit about how this all began and how you ended up writing The Warded Man.
First, thank you for having me. Gulliver was kind enough to invite me out to come to the forum, and Pedro himself has taken an enormous amount of time to show me around Portugal, and it's really been a fantastic week. I apologize that we'll have to do all of this in English, but like Americans, I'm painfully monolingual. My entire life, I knew that I wanted to be a writer. It's something that I was always working towards, but I also knew that I wasn't a very good writer for a long time. It's not something that you do quickly, it's not something that you do easily, because the competition is very fierce. I wrote 4 novels before finally publishing one. The first 2 I never showed to anyone. I knew that they weren't good enough to publish. I knew that they were just practice. The third one I attempted to show to agents and shop around, and it was summarily rejected, and that was a very disheartening experience for me, but it was also one I think that taught me a lot of important lessons about perseverance and about not letting my pride get in the way of my craft. And I came back much stronger, convinced that I could improve further. And so I started work on The Painted Man probably in 1999. And I worked on that for on and off for several years as a hobby while working full-time in the publishing industry doing medical publishing. So the book had started out as a writing assignment for a class I was taking, where they said, make up the beginning of a fantasy novel. And so it was something that the way I tended to approach school at the time is I would wait until the last possible second and then write something right before class. And in this case, I wrote a short story about a boy named Arlen who was never able to travel more than a day from home because he had to get home before dark and lock himself up before the demons came out. And he always wanted to know what was further than one day away from home. He always wanted to know what was over that next hill. And that story stayed with me for a long time, and I was always thinking about it, and I was wondering myself what was over the next hill, what would he find? And so I began working on the story from that perspective. And then while I was working on it, I was in New York City during September 11th and saw the effect that those events had on the people in New York, mostly in terms of fear and the reactions to it. My office building could see the devastation, and everyone that I worked with had a different reaction. One person immediately left the building and ran home to his family. Another person, other people went outside and had to go close to the wreckage to see if they could help or just to get a look. Some people froze up and didn't know what to do, and it was that variety of reactions that interested me, and I had a very personal reaction to it because my wife's family was in the towers at the time. They were evacuated and managed to get out all right, but we didn't know that at the time, and so the concept behind the book became humans have been hunted almost to extinction. There aren't very many of them left. And those that there are live in terror because every night the demons come out and every morning there's less humans than there were before. And I wanted to explore not so much the demons themselves, but how that affected the people and how that made some people freeze up and how it made other people determined to find a way to face their fears and to go forward. And so I created 3 characters, began them as children, and showed how each of them was scarred by a demon event in their childhood, and how that opened new paths to them and opened new doors for them and forced them to confront the world in a way that their parents and families hadn't for generations. And so that was the beginning of the story, and then over the course of the story these characters grow up and each of them find a different way to resist and fight back. And that's the crux of the first book.
The Painted Man came out, and then 2 years later we had the Desert Spear. The feedback from readers in Portugal has been that the Painted Man it's a good book, but most of them are amazed by the Desert Spear. How do you react as an author to this kind of feedback? And has this happened somewhere else besides Portugal?
Some people have had that reaction, some people haven't. Personally, I like to think that I'm continuing to grow as a writer, and I do kind of feel like the Desert Spear was really much more in my own voice. When you're an aspiring author, you're trying to sell your book in addition to write the book that you want to write. So to a certain extent, I was holding back a little bit in The Painted Man because I wanted something that was more mainstream. I wanted something that was more saleable, in addition to writing what I wanted to write. It's not that I wasn't writing what I wanted to write, but I was writing within a set of boundaries that I set for myself based on what I knew editors were looking for, what I knew editors would buy. And I think that it's important to keep that market in mind when you're writing, if you're looking to be a published writer. I mean, if you just want to write for yourself and have no one ever read your books, then write whatever you want. But if you're looking to sell your books and have a lot of people read them, you do need to take that market into consideration. So for the first book, I think I was a little more careful. But once I had a contract that said, you can write 3 books, that freed my hands a lot to do something that was more mature, that was darker, that was a little more complicated, and it took more risks. So with the Desert Spear, it's kind of the dark side of the Painted Man, meaning there's a character in the first book named Jardir who is something of a villain in that book, as opposed to the hero Arlen who he encounters. The Desert Spear starts out with Jardir as a child and shows that he's a good person, and that he had a very difficult childhood, and that he was raised by a harsh society to become their hero, their greatest hero, and humanizes him in a way that I think people didn't expect. I think that people were looking to see more of the same characters they were reading in the first book. They weren't looking for a hard left turn where the first 200 pages of the new book is about a completely different character that they had come to hate in the first book and grudgingly found themselves liking as they read the second one. And I think that was a risk that I took, where I was a little afraid that people wouldn't react the way I wanted them to react to it, but I was determined that this was the right course and this was what I wanted to do.